Click for IB Biology. Here we're looking at synovial joints, the structure of the hip, and the antagonistic muscle pairs, including the upper arm, but more particularly in the rib cage. There's a PDF of this presentation down here in the description, along with some quick questions with answers, a quiz, and then I'll provide some channel links towards the end of the video. So let's take a look at the structure of the hip. So we have three illustrations here, starting with the X-ray here and then the diagrammatic of that here. This is just a model to show how the movement of the hip performs. We can see that the hip, the pelvis, is in this location here, and this distinct socket into which the head of the femur here fits into that nicely, and that's illustrated across here. So this is the femur here. This is the ball at the head of the femur that fits into the socket, and this provides us with a very wide range of movement at the top of the leg, not only for leg movement but also for the orientation and turning motions that we can generate in our hips. In order to allow that movement to occur readily, the head of the femur and the lining of the socket are covered in a substance called cartilage. This is a smooth, continuous tissue, uncalcified, soft, and allows the smooth articulation of the joint, reducing friction. Between the cartilage of the socket and the cartilage of the head of the femur, there is a fluid called synovial fluid. I'll indicate its location here between the two sets of cartilage. So it's in this zone here, and this fluid also reduces friction, but it has a second function, and that is to absorb pressure. But it's a shock absorber, particularly if when we're doing something like walking, running, jumping. The synovial fluid would absorb much of the shock wave from that, as like many liquids it is virtually incompressible. The entire synovial joint is surrounded by a membrane that encloses this, and that would be called the synovial membrane. And it's actually the synovial membrane is responsible for synthesizing the synovial fluid. The joint is stabilized by structures attaching bone to bone, and these are called the ligaments. So if I write this just here, so remember that ligaments are creating bone-to-bone connections in order to stabilize the joint. Movement, of course, requires effort. The effort is the force of the muscle. The muscles will be attached across this joint here, down onto the femur and up into the pelvic region, muscles such as the quadriceps, the hamstring, and the gluteus. So we have here what is called a ball and socket joint, in which there is rotation in all planes and axes of movement, giving the leg tremendous flexibility. Muscles often will operate in what are called antagonistic pairs, and the purpose of that antagonistic pair is to create movement across a joint, but also to create stability in that movement. Classically, we have the upper arm, in which we have the bicep operating from up here on the scapula and down onto the radius, and then the tricep again engaged on the scapula, going around onto the ulna around either side of the pivot point or the joint, which is the elbow. Contraction of the bicep results in a flexion, a bending of the arm, whereas contraction of the tricep involves an extension, a straightening of the arm. Contrast this with this particular structure here. Here we have the spinal column, part of the axial skeletal system, creating stability. And the stability of the axial spinal column is to allow for the movement of the bones of the rib cage. And the rib cage bones are articulated at the front to the sternum and then at the hind part here onto the spinal column. In order to generate the flexion and the extension process, we have what are called the intercostal muscles, and those are in two sets. The external intercostal muscles, and then there are the internal intercostal muscles. When examining the movement in the rib cage, which of course is important in our study of ventilation in the gas exchange component of this course, contraction of the external intercostal muscles raises the rib cage up and to a certain extent outward. And the consequence of that is to increase the volume of the thorax. This leads, in terms of gas exchange, to inhaling. Now, the internal intercostal muscles, contrastly, are associated with exhaling. And when contracting, what they do is they bring the ribs are brought down and inward. And the effect of this is to decrease the volume of the thorax, increasing the pressure within the alveoli, which results in exhaling. So this is very much an antagonistic pair, rib cage up and down. Contrast that to the bending and straightening the arm in the upper arm and the forearm. Consideration of muscle structure and how the force is generated are in following videos. Should you wish to look at the entire playlist, the link is now available in front of you, and a subscription to this channel should you wish to track all our other videos linked to the IB Biology syllabus.